Have you ever wondered why the word photograph sounds different from photographer and photographic? The English language can be a tricky beast, full of quirks and exceptions. One such quirk is word stress, a fascinating feature that can change the way we pronounce words. Word stress refers to the emphasis or stress we put on certain syllables in a word. Even within the same word family, word stress can shift, altering the pronunciation. Take, for instance, our earlier examples: photograph, photographer, and photographic. They share the same root, yet each word is pronounced differently due to shifts in word stress. It's like a little pronunciation dance, with the stress hopping from one syllable to another. But don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. In fact, understanding word stress can make speaking and understanding English a whole lot easier. So, stay tuned to discover the secret behind these pronunciation changes. Do you know what photograph, photographer, and photographic have in common? This isn't a riddle, it's a question about word families. A word family, in English, is a group of words that share a common root or base. These words are like siblings. They have the same parent word, but each has its own unique character. Let's take a look at the photo word family. The root of this family is photo, which comes from the Greek word phos, meaning light. You see, photo isn't just a word on its own, it's also the base for many other words. When we add graph to photo, we get photograph. Graph also comes from Greek, and it means to write. So a photograph is quite literally writing with light. Interesting, isn't it? Next, we add grapher to photo, and we get photographer. The addition of at the end of graph changes the meaning slightly. Now, instead of writing with light, we have one who writes with light. A photographer is someone who uses light to create images. Finally, we add graphic to photo, and we get photographic. Graphic, in this context, means related to drawing or printing. So photographic means related to the process of creating images with light. You see, all these words are part of the same family. They share the root photo, and they all have something to do with light and image creation. But they each have their own specific meaning. Understanding word families can help you expand your vocabulary, understand the meaning of new words, and it can even improve your spelling. So the next time you encounter a new word, try to find its family. Look for its root and see if you can figure out its siblings. You'd be surprised at how many words you can learn this way. Now that we understand word families, let's dive into word stress. Can you say photograph, photographer, and photographic out loud? Now let's pronounce them together, and don't worry if you stumble a bit. That's part of the process. We'll start with photograph. The stress is on the first syllable, so it sounds like photograph with a strong pho. Can you say that? Photograph. That's it. Now let's move on to photographer. This time the stress shifts to the second syllable. It sounds like photographer with a strong tog. Go ahead, give it a try. Photographer. Well done. Finally, we have photographic. The stress here is on the third syllable, so it sounds like photographic with a strong graph. Can you say that? Photographic. Excellent. Do you notice how the stress changes position as we move from photograph to photographer and photographic? This is a common pattern in English, especially with word families like these. Now let's go through them again, but this time let's clap on the stressed syllable. Ready? Photograph, clap, photographer, clap, and photographic, clap. If you're finding it difficult to get the stress right, here's a little trick. Imagine that the stressed syllable is a bit heavier and needs more effort to say. It's like bouncing a ball. The stressed syllable is where the ball hits the ground with a bounce. Now let's try some common mispronunciations. Often, photographer is mispronounced as photographer with the stress on the first syllable. But remember, it's photographer with the stress on the second syllable. And for photographic, people sometimes say photographic, stressing the first syllable. But we know it's photographic, with the stress bouncing on the third syllable. Just remember, practice makes perfect. The more you say these words, the more natural the stress patterns will feel. Now, let's say them one more time, with confidence and a bit of rhythm. Ready? Photograph, photographer, and photographic. And there you have it. You've just learned how to correctly stress the words photograph, photographer, and photographic. Keep practicing these words, and soon, the correct stress patterns will become second nature. You'll be pronouncing these words like a native speaker in no time. Great job, you're getting the hang of word stress. Ready for more word stress fun? Let's dive into another set of word families. Remember, word families consist of a base word and its derivatives. This time, we're going to explore the graph family. This includes words like photograph, photographer, and photographic. Now let's play with these words. In photograph, the stress is on the first syllable, photograph. Can you hear that emphasis on PO? Great, now let's move on to photographer. Here, the stress shifts to the second syllable, photographer. Can you notice the difference? And finally, we have photographic, where the stress is on the third syllable, photographic. Isn't it fascinating how the stress shifts within the same word family? Let's try another word family now, the spect family. This includes words like spectator, spectacle, and spectacular. In spectator, the stress is on the first syllable, spectator. Moving on to spectacle, the stress remains on the first syllable, spectacle. But when we say spectacular, the stress shifts to the second syllable, spectacular. Even though these words belong to the same family and share the same root, the stress changes as we move from one word to another. That's the beauty of word stress. Now don't worry if you're still finding it a bit tricky. It's all about practice. Try saying these words out loud. Repeat them. Play with them. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel. You can even make a game out of it. See how many word families you can think of and try to identify where the stress falls in each word. Remember, language is a beautiful playground. You're not just learning, you're exploring, discovering, and having fun. You're doing fantastic. Keep practicing and you'll master word stress in no time. So what have we learned today about word stress and word families? We've embarked on a fun and interactive journey, delving into the world of English language, exploring the concept of word stress and its significance in the pronunciation of word families. We've seen that word families are groups of related words that share a common base or root. For instance, photograph, photographer, and photographic all belong to the same word family because they share the common root photograph. We've also taken a deep dive into the concept of word stress. It's the emphasis or accent placed on a particular syllable in a word. Remember, not all syllables are created equal. Some are pronounced with more force or emphasis, and that's what we call word stress. It's like a drumbeat in the rhythm of the English language. We've had a fun time identifying the stressed syllable in a variety of words. For example, in the word photograph, the stress falls on the first syllable, photograph, while in photographer, the stress shifts to the second syllable, photographer. And that's the beauty of word stress. It can change even within the same word family. But of course, the learning doesn't stop here. The English language is a vast and vibrant field, filled with many more word families and stress patterns to explore. So keep practicing what you've learned today. Play around with different words, try to identify their stress syllables, and see how the stress shifts within a word family. Remember, practice makes perfect. The more you play with word stress, the more natural it will become, and the more your English pronunciation will improve. So don't be afraid to experiment and make mistakes. That's how we learn. Thank you for joining us today. Keep practicing, and we'll see you in our next fun English lesson.